the Live So Well Speaker Series. It's a monthly series with notable folks from around Central Ohio that practice in the field of health and wellness. We're excited to introduce our first Live So Well speaker, Dr. Phan at Ohio State. Dr. Phan is the head of behavioral health and psychiatry. You can consider the words of Thomas Edison. He said, our greatest weakness is in giving up, and our greatest strength is giving it one more shot. And that speaks to resilience. And that's really what we're here to talk about tonight, is resilience.
I think we've heard the word resilience and being resilient a number of different ways in the past year. In the past years so far is probably the most commonly used word, I think, in general, which is a nice word, I think. We've been trying to use this word for a good decade now and trying to define it better. And for us, resilience is the ability to bounce back, adapt, learn, and even thrive in the face of adversity. And then to build those skills and those toolboxes so that you're prepared for the next adversity that comes. To me, that's what resilience is. And I think that the power of resilience doesn't sit in a clinic. It doesn't sit in a hospital. It actually sits in ourselves at home, at schools, and in workplaces. And putting together that set of puzzle pieces is really key. Resilience, I think, is about empowering the individual and the families to pick up the skills and to learn and adapt in a way that lets them meet challenges head on. A lot of people ask me, what does resilience training will look like? What will it look like? And I compare it a lot to resistance training. And resistance training is about adapting our muscles to go against some pressure that our muscles need to counter against. And so to me, without adversity, without turmoil, without stress, there's never going to be resilience. So I welcome the learning from adversity and vulnerability in that way in terms of adapting. You know, we really should focus on good nutrition, movement and exercise, sleep, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, I think those are the really core powers of resilience. And I think that beyond that, in the individual, I think one of the more powerful things about resilience is social connection. I really think that social connection is going to be a core factor going forward. And that's why COVID has been so detrimental to us as a society, us as a community, because it robbed us of all of the social connections that usually exist. So that's to me, social connection is not only really, really important, but I see it eroding every single day. You know, for some of us who have teenage children like I do, they're stuck on a phone the vast majority of their lives. And they feel very, very connected to the phone. And they have this perception that they're really connected to the social networks that they're on the phone. But I don't know if that's real connection. And as corny as it is, the other powerful things about resilience is developing a sense of kindness. This notion that giving on to others will bring a sense of joy and a sense of gratitude unto yourself, that you're doing something to help your fellow humankind. And I think that's another powerful piece of resilience in terms of kindness. And the other elements of resilience I sort of think about is the power of hope, that we often sort of think about when we're in therapy, or when you're in therapy, we often try to think about the moment, the here and the now. But sometimes I actually think it's powerful to take a step back and think about where we are along decades of our life, so that the perspective of here and now is actually really small relative to a much larger span of life. And that we as one human being is part of a much larger network that is a fabric. And I think the more that we can understand that sense of gratitude with others and spreading kindness is really powerful as well. I really believe that if you wake up in the morning and you think about these things, how am I going to eat better today? How will I move today? How will I sleep better today? How will I connect with others today? How can I spread kindness today? I think those are really 5 core elements of being really resilient, you know, and I think that's stuff that's really outside the clinic. That's not a medication that you could take to solve that. You know, I think a lot of patients come to me and they ask, is there a medication that will make me feel better today. And there's nothing like that. But I really think that resilience is about empowering us all to take a look at ourselves, empower ourselves to figure out ways in which we can build ourselves up rather than use a medication or use a strategy that we try to do in the clinic. When we go to medical school, and Dr. Shackelford is probably the only person in the other room who's been through medical school, but we get this gigantic textbook. It's called The Pathological Basis of Disease. And I think that textbook is now doubled or tripled in size. Now there's 3 volumes of it. But we never got a textbook on how to stay well. We only got a textbook and learned about how you got sick, but we never got a textbook on how to stay well. And if you look at the blue spots around the world where people live into 100 years, 110 years of their lives, they're not taking medicines, they're not going to the doctor, they just live the life that they're meant to live, which is getting up in the morning, putting in a hard days of work, eating what they sow in the land, and connecting with one another in the work that they do. And those things, I think, are what makes those individuals really resilient and live not only a long life, but live a happy life. And what's sad about it is that in America, we've spent so much of our GDP or expenditures on healthcare, but yet we have one of the worst rates of infant mortality, the highest rates of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, metabolic disease around the world. And so pouring more money into the medical complex hasn't really reduced the burden of disease. It hasn't eradicated disease. And so really there are a lot of lessons to be learned about prevention. Absolutely. In this regard, and I think that we can learn a lot from other countries who spend a lot less money on healthcare and do things that really promote health all around. And that's really the holistic part, that it isn't just about the external pharmaceutical compound that makes you live longer and makes you live better. Things that you can do yourself, whether it's through food, whether it's through exercise, whether through its social connection. I think those things are more powerful medicines than anything else. Probably the hardest thing to change is human behavior. Habits, patterns that we've grown up with are really, really hard to change. If you think about what gets any one of us into trouble, it's about the patterns and the habits that we get stuck into. So behavioral change is really, really hard. And behavior change only happens small steps by small step. Learning, adapting with each and every little step that you take. The more weeks and the more days that you build on, incrementally, you develop a new pattern, a new habit that combats the old habits before. No one's gonna pick up a better diet tomorrow, I don't think. Just like nobody's gonna stop smoking in one day. No one's gonna get up and run a marathon the next day either. But training isn't about that, right? It's about making small changes. And then each small change that you get, you feel good about it, and that reinforces you to continue that pattern. And then you develop a different pattern over time. So I had the privilege to meet Harry Miller this past year. Harry Miller was an aspiring offensive lineman for the Ohio State football team. And even though he struggled throughout his childhood and adolescence with mental health issues, he never found the courage to ask for help until the very, very recent years, right? And he said that he wanted to start a campaign, and he started to make, like, his mom and him made these sweatshirts from scratch that sort of said, "Don't make it weird." Because I think that a lot of times we think of mental illness and mental health challenges as something weird, something that is shameful, something that is that we should be guilty about. So I think we got to move away from that as well. And I think the more public officials, the more public figures speak about mental health, it sort of speaks to the fact that it affects everyone. I love it, the fact that so many of our athletes are speaking about mental health. I mean, look at. I mean, if you think about our children and who they look up to most, it's musicians, it's athletes, it's actors. Those are like their modern day heroes, right? And the more that those folks are speaking about mental health and how important it is, I think that's been a big movement as well.